Mary Holland, you are the president and the general counsel of Children's Health Defense. It is the organization that Bobby Kennedy Jr. founded. He is the chairman of the board, and he was recently, if I'm correct, he was booted from Instagram. Is that right?
His account was closed. He was deplatformed. And we're hopeful that Facebook will have a review of his case before its newly created oversight
Okay, you said
board.
Facebook, but we're talking Instagram. Did he lose accounts on both?
Facebook owns
Oh,
Instagram.
that's right.
And we are, since last August 2020, we have been in litigation against Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, and several unnamed fact checkers related to their suppression of the Children's Health Defense website.
What happened?
Nothing. Nothing from our standpoint. There was really no triggering event that we can, discern, except that from our perspective, and this is in our lawsuit against Facebook, Facebook and other social media platforms have been pressured by the government. So, as you know, they have liability protection under the Communications Decency Act, under Section 230. So long as they don't post anything to people's sites, and they're just an internet service provider, they have liability protection. But in 2019, Adam Schiff, a very influential Democratic representative in Congress, applied pressure to Facebook and Twitter and other platforms to say that they should be censoring what he called misinformation about vaccines. So we wrote back to that, Allison, immediately and said, we wish that it were misinformation. It's not. Everything that we publish is peer-reviewed science, or it's from government sources, the Center for Defense Information, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or the Food and Drug Administration. And so we didn't get any response, and we wrote also to Facebook. And over time, Children's Health Defense's Facebook page was warning labels would be put up on our Facebook page. Our donate button was removed. We were what's called shadow banned so that people wouldn't be able to find us. So as a part of that general trend, there's been increasing pressure from government on social media platforms, including Facebook. The Biden administration was reported last week to be directly going to social media and asking them to censor what they call vaccine misinformation. So our contention is that this is actually violating the First Amendment, and this is social media platforms acting as a proxy for government agents. We also think that Mark Zuckerberg, who's the principal of Facebook and Instagram, he is directly involved in vaccine manufacturing through his Chan Zuckerberg initiative. And we also do work related to 5G technologies that have many health-related impacts, and he's also very deeply involved in that. So we think there's both a financial dimension, but also a dimension in which Facebook is acting at the behest of the government.
I probably should have done this earlier, but I wanted to give people a quick background if they're not familiar with what Children's Health Defense is. And I'm on your websites, why we do what we do, and the mission statement basically here is the Children's Health Defense Team is devoted to the health of people on our planet. Our mission is to end the childhood health epidemics by working aggressively to eliminate harmful exposures, hold those responsible accountable, and establish safeguards so this never happens again. What you see when you look at, say, this article from the New York Times, and I think probably you're used to hearing in other media outlets, is that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is barred from Instagram over false coronavirus claims, and he's called an anti-vaxxer, somebody who spreads COVID misinformation. So I want to give you a chance to respond to especially some of the stuff that's in these media reports, because, again, I'm aware that I didn't even see if they reached out to you, say, in this New York Times article about losing his Instagram account. So I didn't see a response. So would you mind responding to that? Is that a fair title? Anti-vaxxer okay.
No, it's not a fair title at all, and it's not fair to say that we're spreading misinformation. Both of those characterizations are false, and we consider much of what's said about Bobby Kennedy to be defamatory. So anti-vaccine is incorrect. We are vaccine safety advocates. We're safety advocates in general for children. 54% of American children have some kind of chronic health condition, be it asthma, autism, ADHD, asthma. There's just so many things, allergies. So we're trying to get to the bottom of that. And certainly vaccines are a highly plausible cause for some of the problems for children's health. We're not against vaccines, but what we're for is real science. And in fact, all vaccines for children have been tested against other vaccines. They've never been tested against true inert placebos. In other words, there's never been true control groups for the science on vaccines. That is misinformation. No, we are rigorous in our vetting of source material, Allison. So we use peer-reviewed science, or we use government data. We look at, what does the CDC produce? What does the FDA produce? What does NIH produce? What does HHS produce? We only cite to those accepted scientific sources. What is characterized as misinformation in the mainstream media, unfortunately, are things that disagree with the mainstream narrative, which is that all vaccines are good, all vaccines are safe and effective. If you don't get a COVID vaccine, you're going to die. Those are just those are platitudes. That's propaganda. It's not the truth. The truth is a lot more messy. It's a lot more complicated. We absolutely don't deny for a second that COVID is a very serious infectious disease. It is. It's a very serious infectious disease. People have died from it. But that doesn't mean that the vaccines are necessarily the right intervention. One of the things we've been saying for a year is that all of the emphasis and the money and the narrative is about vaccines, whereas what people have really needed over the last year are good therapeutics, and very little money's gone into that, and there's been real issues around suppression of information about effective therapeutics.
As you were saying that, I went back to the New York Times article, because I thought it was interesting that they have quotes actually from his niece and other brother or sister and the niece, I guess, and they're quoting the column they wrote for Politico in 2019, saying that he was spreading dangerous misinformation. And the quote is, "I love my Uncle Bobby." This is Carrie Kennedy Meltzer. "I admire him for many reasons, chief among them his decades-long fight for a cleaner environment. But when it comes to vaccines, he is wrong." But I didn't see any quote in here from you all or Mr. Kennedy. So I just thought that was curious.
I can't tell you. Yeah, so on the one for Politico, Bobby wrote a 10-page response to that article, and they wouldn't run it, Allison. And the op-ed by Carrie Kennedy Meltzer, an internist in New York, Bobby's niece, they ran. And again, they wouldn't even publish a letter response by Bobby. So, the mainstream gets 70% of its revenue stream from the pharmaceutical industry. They're not interested in the other side of the story, which is why people are flocking to alternative media. So we put out a daily publication called The Defender by Children's Health Defense, and we have millions of readers at this point.
Even if you just want to have a debate about it, and of course, if you're going to be debating, and where everybody talks now is on social media, but you're not allowed to have these conversations, and then people say, well, there's no information about that. Well, is that because the information is not there, or because it's not allowed to be there? And that's why I wanted to bring you on to talk about it, just because, not because I'm endorsing one thing or the other either way, but I'm simply interested in people whose voices, especially high profile voices, the president of the United States, the son of a very well-known, American statesman. And so, and a family that has quite a legacy in this country, he loses his account. So, eventually we see how it can start with something. This is a very controversial topic. I'm sure there are a lot of people that say, yeah, but of course, get rid of that. Just like they said, say for, there's Trump, of course, get rid of him. But eventually there are those of us who are who are unsure and somewhat alarmed that eventually the line moves closer and closer and closer and closer. We're paying attention to the people that are getting booted from these sites, and we want to know more about how these decisions are being made.
We're pleased to see that Facebook, which covers Instagram, has created an internal policy board about these issues and really important questions about freedom of speech. It's called the Oversight Board, and it's a global group of high profile people. Many of them are lawyers. And so we are hopeful that Facebook and Instagram will permit Bobby to have an appeal to the Oversight Board, as Trump's deplatforming is now being appealed to the Oversight Board. We don't know that that will happen, but certainly what happened when he was deplatformed was that Facebook went out with a press release to all of the organs of media saying, we're deplatforming this person because he's anti-vaccine and he's putting out misinformation. That's defamatory. I mean, neither of those statements are true. And there's real questions about whether there was even, malice in their making those false statements. They may believe that he's anti-vaccine, but that's not really an excuse. I mean, he has several children, all of whom he vaccinated. And his view and my view is we just want people to have accurate information. We want real science to be done, and then it needs to be a choice.
Let me draw your attention to another article that I found about the lawsuit, and it's not a very nice title, I will say that, but I wanted to read you the arguments again just to give you a chance to respond. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s insanely stupid lawsuit against Facebook, and it's by TECHDIRT. I think the website is above the law, and I'll put all these links in the description so people can read this stuff, and then more links to information that you would like people to have. Happy to put that in the description as well so people can go to the direct source material. But basically, this guy's argument is, why are you suing Facebook and PolitiFact? And is there one more, I believe, on top of it, instead of, say, suing Adam Schiff, for instance, because isn't he part of the lawsuit? So why not go after the government if you believe it's a First Amendment issue? Yeah. Why go after Facebook?
No, because Adam Schiff isn't censoring us. Facebook has liability protection. They can't be sued unless they put material on your website, which they've done extensively for us by putting warning labels and say, go to the CDC site, go to the World Health Organization site. Mm-hmm. And we believe that they did that at the behest or under threat by government actors, by Adam Schiff. And we're not arguing. We do agree that this is a private entity. We do believe that Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook do have the right to deplatform things that they disagree with, but we don't agree that they should be doing it at the behest of the government when our information does not meet any of the criteria of inciting violence or being pornography or being obscene. There's no basis for censoring us. We are giving out truthful information that we believe is essential information to people, especially in the COVID context.
It's interesting. I guess a lot of these headlines are pretty similar. This is another one from The Verge. Anti-vaccination group sues Facebook over fact-checking program. Robert F. Kennedy was a leading anti-vax advertiser. So that's basically just what everybody says at the beginning of all of their articles. And you're essentially saying that that's not even, the beginning is not even true.
Not even true, but we understand Allison, it's a very pejorative label. It's very pejorative. It's intended to marginalize us. It's not accurate. And, using the criteria that are currently being used, I don't know if you saw, but last summer, Mark Zuckerberg in a staff meeting based on a bootlegged videotape that was on Project Veritas said, I have my concerns whether these new COVID vaccines will affect people's RNA and DNA. Well, according to his current guidelines, he would be deplatformed. Or Kamala Harris in the campaign for the vice president position said, I wouldn't take a vaccine that Trump recommended. Well, now Biden is saying basically, if you say that, you're inhibiting people's getting vaccines. So a lot depends on whose ox is being gored at this point. It's a very important issue, and people should have access to information.
When they refer to the COVID misinformation specifically, are you aware of what they're discussing?
There's no accurate basis to that. You look at our website, there's probably 15 hyperlinks in every article that we put out. I mean, we're citing to the CDC, we're citing to the FDA, we're citing to peer-reviewed science, we're citing to JAMA, we're citing to the New England Journal of Medicine, we're citing to the Lancet. We are rigorous in citing to information that is, we think credible information.
If the government was not pressuring these tech companies to suppress speech that they find to be any number of things that they don't want out there, would you be taking action against them otherwise?
I can't tell you whether we would have brought the case, Allison. We have claims that are unrelated to the government. We have racketeering claims that we really believe that the organization is suppressing our speech in order to make money. They are engaged in manufacturing, promoting the pharmaceutical industry and vaccines. So we believe that they're not really living by their terms of service. We entered into a contract that we would use their site and that they would abide by the rules and we would abide by the rules. From our perspective, we did abide by them. They haven't because of underhanded, not disclosed financial interests. So we would still have racketeering claims against Facebook, even if the government weren't involved. But our first claim does relate to the First Amendment. And we think that's a very significant issue because we really do believe that Facebook is working in a concerted way with the Centers for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the World Health Organization, and with Adam Schiff, and they get some funding from the State Department. The Poynter Institute, that's their fact checker, gets money from the State Department. We think that's problematic. If the government is using social media as a proxy to censor disfavored information, then there's a reason that it's the First Amendment, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. You can't have a democracy without that. And a quote that Robert Kennedy often uses which is a quote from Germany from the 1850s, in a country where they burn books, they will burn people. I mean, this is not, if ideas can't be engaged in and there can't be civil discourse, then you leave people very few options for what is going to be done. There needs to be robust communication about vaccines right now. Essentially, the whole world is entering into a whole new paradigm of a biosecurity state. There are passports now for children to get into school. There are passports for people to get into country. There are passports for people to keep their jobs based on their vaccination status. That should mean that this is something that everybody is talking about. Is this the way we want to go as a global community or not? And if our speech on this is being suppressed, that's a problem.
Is there anything else I did not ask you that you would like to add?
Just to say, I think already in some countries, what we're seeing are really violent reprisals against people who disagree with wearing masks or with getting these vaccines or with taking PCR tests. And I think that's terrible. But that is, if people can't talk about these issues, I think, escalation is inevitable.
Honestly, just curious, and I'm interested in asking people who have been in these situations if they would ever draw the line, or are you kind of an absolutist about it? As the future moves in the direction of potentially having more and more of this, do you ever feel like there's a good time to do it, or no? Is it always just too much of a risk because you could be throwing out a few good voices by trying to target some of the bad ones? Just curious where you fall on the line there.
Well, I actually think that, for now, Twitter and Facebook have become the public square. And, I think that the general rules of the road in the United States have been different than in most countries. So in Europe, Article 19 of the European Charter of Rights allows for suppression of what is considered hate speech. And so, Mein Kampf wasn't published in Germany for 60 years after World War II. We always in the United States have had a very different view of freedom of expression under the First Amendment. And I do believe that, you can't publish pornography of children. You can't publish obscenity. You can't publish incitement to violence. Those are all fine. I agree with those. But anything else, I think it's crucial that we have a marketplace of ideas. And when you try to suppress the marketplace of ideas, you will ultimately pay a big price. I would urge people to come and check out the information that we're putting out on a daily basis on the Defender at the website childrenshealthdefense.org. We are, and one of the things I love about our Defender part of the website is that not only are there articles, but then people can discuss them. And we have somebody curate them. I mean, we won't publish people who have vile language or who are, insightful in any way, inciting violence or anything like that. But you can have a robust discussion. So we have people with different viewpoints, and we think it's the only way forward. Not everybody's going to agree about everything, but once people get information, then at least they can come to informed choices, and then they can feel good about their choices. One of the things that's most distressing right now, Allison, is if people aren't well informed and then they make a decision that they ultimately come to see as a bad decision, they are angry.
Mary Holland of Children's Health Defense, I really appreciate your taking the time to come on the channel. And again, please send me any links that you would like me to share on my the description of the video, and I will also have the links for all the articles that I referenced here as well. And that's all I got. Thanks again.